Hello everyone, my name is Pastor Phil Lemaitre from Crossbridge Church. I've been asked to give you this presentation for what grief looks like in a box. Normally I would do this, I would be doing this demonstration live with you between your 10th and 11th week of Grief Share. But I have to say, with this COVID-19 response and what everybody has to go through, we in the ministry have had to scramble to do unorthodox things in order to bring the peace of God to you. And I just want to give a shout out to your Grief Share facilitators, Walter and Fred, for their outside the box thinking, if you pardon the pun, and how to bring this to you. So let's talk about grief. One of my favorite professors, H. Norman Wright, wrote this great book, talks about grief much like an earthquake. Right after the event of someone's death, whoever it was, whether it was a brother, sister, mom, dad, child, or even your best friend, he equates it to almost like an earthquake, that everything is moving in your life, and it's just a really, really difficult time. And one thing that H. Norman Wright talks about is that before you can begin to put your life back together, it's just like an earthquake, you have to let the violent motion stop. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to have peaks and valleys. As H. Norman Wright, again, I'm going to give another shout out to his book. It's a wonderful resource for any other facilitators out there. One of the things that he talks about is the process of grief. And he uses a scale. At the top of the scale is, if this is time and and going vertically is the amount of grief or the intensity of feelings that you have. For the first 3 months on that scale, you have an intensity of feelings, and then there's a sudden dip off. Somewhere around the 11th, 12th, or even 13th month past the funeral, there's a sharp increase, and it actually peaks higher than your feelings that you felt at the initial moment that you were going through your grief. This is the appropriate place. This is the appropriate time to seek a grief share near you, or seek a pastor, or any other type of counseling. But the dynamics of grief are such that it affects everything in your being. So, speaking of which, this is us. This box, you can buy this at any Hobby Lobby. It's just a display case that I use for this demonstration. It has a mirror, and a matter of fact, if you looked into the mirror, you were sitting here with me, you would see your reflection of yourself. So, view this box as you. What grief does for us. At the initial moment that we lose a loved one, we start to recall all these different memories of this sticky note represents those memories. In a little bit, we'll discuss what those memories turn into. But these are just simple memories. We're remembering, use my father as an example. My father's still alive, but I can imagine that I can remember the first time we went fishing. I can remember what the sounds that my dad makes when he stirs his coffee. Little things. It's not major things. My dad carrying me on his shoulders. Here's a good one. My dad yelling at me from the sideline during a football game. But all these little things are trapped inside of us. When a person dies, our grief grows. As I was telling you about that sliding scale, the hugeness and intensity of your feelings is represented in this ball. And as you can see, you can't move without hitting a trigger memory, and that's what those memories are. They become triggers to this grief, and it just seems, and if I turn it this way, you can see that there's little room, and it's always pushing on a trigger. Perhaps in a few months, your grief is this size, but your memories and triggers are still big. So as you move around, you're going to the store, you have that memory. You go to the gas station, you go to the post office, you're constantly touching one of those trigger memories. But this is the great thing about Grief Share. Grief Share takes those memories. We're not discarding them at all. we're teaching you a great process to take and honor those people that we're grieving for and replace those, take the size of those triggers and move them to a more manageable size. I look at it this way. When I recently, well, it's almost been 3 years. I think it's kind of funny, in the grief process you always think of your loved one, it's just happened. It's almost, at the end of April will be 3 years that I lost my best friend. Now, 2 years ago, if I brought up my best friend, I'd get this swell in my throat, and I would try as I may to not shed a few tears at just mentioning his name. Now I can talk about story after story about him. The fact is, it's still there, but I've been able to process it to where I can honor his memory without being a detriment to me, and it doesn't change the way, doesn't change my behavior for myself and especially for those that are around us. So again, the process of grief takes those memory triggers and reduces them to a size. Now, here we go. Here's that 3 or 4 month grief. Actually, this could be even 9-month grief. But as you can see, as you move around your day, it's a little bit tougher to hit one of those triggers. But when you do, there's very little contact on that trigger. So it may be that momentarily you recalled something about, your loved one, and those tears do start to rise. But here's really what process grief really looks like. It's this. It never goes away. The simple fact is grief never ever goes away. But we can manage it in a size that we still honor the memory of our loved one, yet we can still move forward. Before I go any further, H. Norman Wright says, there's 3 periods involved in surviving and rebuilding. The first one is bridging the past, and we do that through memories. Living in the present, and I think that's the hardest part of the entire grief process, living in this present. And that's really what this demonstration talks about. And then finding a path for the future is the third one. When we process our grief, it goes from this all the way down to here. Then we're able to live in the present. And as you can see, as we go through our day, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see. It's very difficult to hit those triggers. The fact is, those triggers are still there. And sometimes a trigger your grief can linger on a trigger just like that. But those are the times that we pull out our grief share notebooks and we go through that. Perhaps we're stuck, just like we are right here in this demonstration. You pull out your grief share notebooks and you go to that section that addresses what you're feeling. And pretty soon, you've moved off of that. Now, I hope that this demonstration, and in live, I apologize because in live I can interact with you, I can answer questions, and it really use this model to its fullest extent. But I hope you can now see that you can transition your grief from the initial to the mid down to what it really ends up being for the rest of your life. And then also those trigger memories that bring up all the bad, that bring up the tears, and it brings up, makes you want to stay in bed, to making you dysfunctional, brings it down to that size where we can manage it. And we can do all these things through Christ who gives me strength, Philippians 4:13. I hope this demonstration was fruitful for you, and I thank you for watching in, and I look forward to seeing all of you in person one day again. We will survive this coronavirus 19, and we'll see you next time.